Good afternoon. Good afternoon. There we go. Welcome to the National Civil Rights Museum. I'm Terri Freeman. I'm president of the museum, and it is an honor to welcome you here today and to host you here today. I really want to thank the Grizzlies and the Grizzlies Foundation, the NBA and ESPN for partnering with us on this conversation. A conversation that I think is particularly significant when we see the power of sport and the power of athletes. This power is reflected in the significant capital that sports generate for municipalities and for educational institutions, and the seemingly instant celebrity that it generates for its players. This power is reflected in the eyes of young people across the world who see their futures in every fast break, jump shot, and three-pointer of athletes like the incredible individuals who you're going to hear from this afternoon. However, when I think about the intersection of race and sport, which is our topic today, I really think about the bully pulpit that athletes can employ to impact community. The increasing racial tensions in our neighborhoods, in our cities, and across our nation we've experienced over the past few years have created an atmosphere that I believe is ripe for athletes to get involved. As well, we will hear from these athletes today about their stories. One of the most recent displays of this power that we are all familiar with was that of the Mizzou football team. They demonstrated their support of student protesters by refusing to play. While some were really put off by their actions, that level of activism, frankly, in college student athletes, for me, was a welcome display of understanding the powerful role they play in their college community and understanding that their success was ultimately connected to the success of all the students at the university. A lesson, frankly, I think many grown folks could learn from these young people. They understood the intersection of race and sport. Now, this activism that we saw is not new. Athletes have engaged and spoken out on issues, particularly issues of discrimination and civil rights, for decades. Athletes like Peter Norman, the 1968 sprinter who captured the gold and is famously captured with his gloved fist in the air on the medal stage, a symbolic gesture. Or Catherine Switzer, who in 1967 became the first woman to run the Boston Marathon with a bib number. She had run the race 3 years prior, but was not allowed to get a bib number. Also, we have to think about Willie O'Ree, who broke the color barrier in the NHL in 1958. And of course, the names that we are really familiar with, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Muhammad Ali, Satchel Paige, Doug Williams, and Lisa Leslie, just to name a few. Each of these greats have a story. This evening, you will hear from 4 great athletes, each with their own story about the issues at the intersection of race and sport. And facilitating this discussion this evening is Mr. Mark Jones. Mark is a sportscaster with ESPN and ABC. He primarily covers football, college football, and the NBA, and we're thrilled to have him with us this evening to moderate this discussion. Thank you for being here. To all of the panelists, thank you so much for participating in this much-needed conversation, and for all of you that are here with us this evening, thank you for joining us here at the National Civil Rights Museum.
Thank you. And first off, I just want to say on behalf of everybody at ESPN, we're very excited to be here for the Martin Luther King broadcast of the game tomorrow between the Grizzlies and the Pelicans, and we're honored to be a part of this gathering today at the National Civil Rights Museum. Martin Luther King Day is the anniversary, of course, of the birth of the Reverend Martin Luther King, and an opportunity to reflect back on social justice and where we are at that point in this country, to celebrate how far we've come from our troubled past, as well as plan how we'll move from here to an even more equitable place. And to take note, of course, of the opportunities we all have to make a positive difference right here in the present, in this moment. Last year in this forum, we used this time to discuss the emergence of the Black Lives Matter movement and the emerging voice of NBA athletes on issues and social justice, and the need to embrace our young men of color so that we might able to enable their success in the future in light of the challenges of growing up black and male in the United States of America. This year, we're still talking about all those things, but just a little bit louder. Terri mentioned some of the examples a moment ago, and in many cases, our panel of celebrity athletes here today are not just talking, they're taking more aggressive action to address the most egregious inequities in and around the country that we deal with on a daily basis. So let's meet our panel. First of all, a 12-year NBA veteran in his first season as a Memphis Grizzly. He's already making an impact in the community, most recently partnering with St. Jude and Ronald McDonald House, delivering toys for his two handsome twin boys, included Isaiah and Carter, to children receiving treatment for cancer locally and other catastrophic illnesses. Please welcome everybody, Matt Barnes. She's a WNBA world champ, three-time gold medalist from the Olympics, president of the WNBA Players Association, also currently serving on the U.S. Department of State's Council to Empower Women and Girls through Sports. Please welcome someone who is a very big role model for my two daughters personally, Tamika. Current ESPN analyst, 13-year NBA vet, member of Michigan's Fab Five with the Black Sox and big shorts. Speaking of bucking trends. Established more importantly, the Jalen Rose Foundation and Charlotte Fund that creates opportunity for underprivileged youth, as well as the Jalen Rose Leadership Academy, doing great things in Detroit and his hometown. Please welcome everybody, Jalen Rose. And our final panelist really has changed the landscape of professional basketball as we know it more than any other player in the history of the game. And I've always said that every current NBA player should be given our guy Spencer Haywood a cut based on what he went through, changing the original hardship rule in basketball and how players are drafted. An Olympic gold medalist, four-time NBA All-Star, two-time All-NBA first team, two-time All-NBA second team. Please welcome Spencer Haywood. Let's jump right into things right now. In a move with little precedent in professional sports, you've probably seen the ads recently. The NBA is putting the weight of its multi-billion-dollar brand and the prestige of its star athletes behind a series of television commercials calling for the end of gun violence. While the scope of gun violence extends well beyond our urban communities in places like here in Memphis, we know that the inner city violence is a significant barrier to success for millions of children and families of color. Jalen, why don't you start us off and tell us, what are your thoughts, what do you think it says about the NBA that they're willing to take this on before any of the other professional sports leagues?
I think it's noble. I think it's responsible. I think it's necessary. It also speaks towards the demo of its audience, and that is of a professional basketball league that's 75% black. And while there has been a lot of progress in that area, there's clearly a lot of progress still to be made. A lot of these teams actually play in the inner city. A lot of them play downtown in areas where there are high crime situations happening on a daily basis. So at some point you should address it, and I'm happy that the NBA is taking that step.
Matt, you've seen the ads. What do you make of it?
I think it's great. I mean, having children of my own, I think sometimes the message doesn't get through. I mean, you want to put onus on parents, but sometimes hearing your mom and dad say something repetitively just kind of goes in one ear out the other. But you hear LeBron James say it, Steph Curry say it, James Harden say it, it may stick with them. So I think it's a great idea that the NBA stepped up and took the lead role.
Matt, it was a little more than a year ago that the Clippers showed up on the court with their warm-up shirts inside out. You're very familiar with that, in protest to some of the racist comments made by then-owner Donald Sterling, the team owner. And not long after that, Chris Paul joined, LeBron joined, others protesting the death of Eric Garner, wearing and sporting the I Can't Breathe T-shirts. Are players growing a little bit more radicalized at this time as star athletes do you have a special responsibility to use your platform? And Terri talked about the bully pulpit.
I think so, but I think it's something that shouldn't be forced. You know, some people want to openly speak on it. I'm one of them that's openly willing to speak on it. You know, growing up biracial, my mom being Italian, my dad being black, I never really fit in with anyone. I was never white enough and I was never black enough, so I had a lot of hardships coming up. But with the situation with Mr. Sterling, it was unfortunate, you know, but it came down, we were in the playoffs against Golden State. You know, everyone's saying, hey, don't play, but we had worked so hard to get to that point. We kind of wanted to sit down and brainstorm and think of another way or an idea to show that we understand what he said was wrong, but we still wanted to do it for each other. You know, so myself and Chris, we sat up late talking, and I just said, hey, let's put our shirts on inside out, and once we get out there, let's put our shirts at half court, and it was something we did. Like I said, unfortunately, I think racism is something that's, we've come a long way, but it's still very prevalent in our society. I don't think it's going anywhere. Unfortunately, we have to learn different ways to deal with it. Like I said, again, that you put a lot of onus on parents because it's not only colors, it's sexual preferences, and a lot of different things that people are discriminated against. So I think it's great that athletes and, you know, musicians and other entertainers want to step up and speak to it again because, like I said, I think it comes more, it's more, not necessarily more meaningful, but it may stick coming from your favorite athlete or favorite musician than your mom and dad.
Tamika, what do you think as an athlete, a current athlete, still a special responsibility on the part of people like yourselves to use your voice?
I agree with Matt. I think it is a responsibility, but it should not be forced. You know, you see a lot of different issues, and I know even recently on Twitter, one group was asking LeBron to sit out of a game and not play, and, you know, well, you'll lose fans if you don't play, and I think that puts a lot of pressure on a player. I mean, we worked hard to get to this point to where we're at, and kind of like Matt said, you know, you make it to the playoffs and you want an opportunity to play, and something that you continue to work so hard to get. So I think that putting the responsibility, that's one thing, but as far as, you know, individual, and I think even more so for me now after going through the museum, what can I do to make more of a difference? What voice can I use to be more of a difference? And whether it's for, you know, I don't think it's based on race and gender and sexual preference and religion. You know, how you treat people is one thing. And as an individual, I think the responsibility for myself is treating others the way I want to be treated.
Interesting. Spencer, you, back in the 60s, you have a little bit more of a historical perspective on the movement, the civil rights movement, member of the 1968 Olympic basketball team, and going through that entire selection process. The climate at the time was noticeably different than it is now. What are your thoughts on athletes' voice, where it was back then and where it is right now?
Well, back then, the voice was of the 68 Olympics, where we should boycott the 68 Olympics, and such players took on that mantle. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was one of the first to boycott the 68 Olympics. Elvin Hayes and Wesley Unseld signed their pro contract before entering into the Olympic Games, so they were ineligible. And of course, when we got to the Olympics, Hank Iber decided, who was the coach of the Olympic team, decided, well, we got to cut this team down, and so he was cutting players. Calvin Murphy got cut from the team. Pistol Pete Maravich got cut from the team. Tom Bullwinkle and so on. And they decided, well, you know, and Howard Cosell was like just baffled by this whole idea. We're not going to win a game. Right. What's going on here?
He was cutting some really good players.
Yeah. I know, and so he says, well, we got a young player that's going to serve and do this whole thing. And he pointed to me, and I was like, oh, my God. I was 18. And that's the first year that they allowed a freshman to try out for the Olympic team because of all of the boycotts and so forth and so on. And we got there, and once we got there, Harry Edwards wanted us to boycott and do something differently. And we was sitting in a big room like this, all of the American athletes, and Tommy Smith and John Carlos says, well, yeah, I'm going to do something. I'm going to wear the glove. And we were like, well, you know, it's not going to fit this big old mitt. So, and so we were discussing the idea of, like, you know, what should we do? And the door creaked open, and it was Jesse Owens, and we were like, oh, man, Jesse Owens are here, you know? And he was explaining to us, you know, look, you guys should go out here and represent this country. And he was telling us in a very nice way. And then we were like, oh, man, what is he talking about? And then he turned to us immediately and said, look, what would any of you felt like if you had to run before Hitler? And we were like, whoa, well, we got to play.
Wow, yeah.
And so we went on out and started playing and enjoyed the Olympics. But and then shortly after the Olympics, I came back to the University of Detroit, just having a tremendous year in sports. And on April the 4th, before we were getting ready for the selections and all of that stuff, and we had the March selections, but just right after the selections, and then we heard this shot. I mean, it was like Martin Luther King is dead. We were like, what's going on here? And so we were like just in shock. I mean, and then of course, I mean, my whole life changed because I was in Detroit where the revolution, where Martin Luther King gave his first speech before he did the I Have a Dream speech. And I was just enthused about like maybe there should be some changes taking place.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What were some of the, what was it like dealing with some of the outside influences to either speak up or protest in different methods? What was that like to deal with at such an important time in your career as an Olympian, playing for a gold medal, representing your country?
Well, it was protest all around. I mean, and at that period, shortly after, you had Curt Flood was there fighting for the rights for free agency for baseball players, because before Curt Flood, you could not go from another team to another because the owners said that I own you until your contract, not only your contract, but I own you internally and forever. And so you had Curt Flood, and then you had Muhammad Ali. They're fighting for the right to fight and not go to the Vietnam War. So there I was in the middle of these cases thrown in. And here I am. I just wanted to play basketball, and next thing they knew, next thing I knew,
gold medal, right?
Yeah, I just want a gold medal. But then I was getting ready to go into the NBA, and they said, "Well, you can't play here. You haven't finished your 4 years of college." And I was like, "Well," so Sam Schulman says, "Well, I'll tell you what. I will pay you." The owner of the Sonics said, "Well, I'll pay you for this year. Just sit out and let this thing fly over, and then we'll go." And I was like, "No, I had to fight."
Right.
And I spoke out of turn because I didn't know it was going to be a big fight, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the organizers of the civil rights movement at that time was Thurgood Marshall and all those people. And there I was in front of him at the Supreme Court, and he's looking at me, and I'm talking to him, and he handed down my decision, Haywood versus the NBA, and I was like, I won. I was 20 years old, so I'm looking at all these things, and you think about it, and you look up over all of these years, and I was telling Jalen back earlier, I was like, I got elected into the Hall of Fame this year. I'm being recognized by the players now for what I've done, and also as a player, and it goes back to my mother's song, my mother's favorite song, and she used to sing it to us in the cotton fields of Silver City, Mississippi, before I got to Detroit, and it goes, "He may not come when you want him, but it's right on time." Y'all know what I'm talking about. So that's Mahalia Jackson, and she was also at Martin Luther King's speech at the I Have a Dream speech, and you could hear the voice say, "Tell him about the dream. Tell him about the dream." And that was Mahalia Jackson.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm here today.
That's great. Wonderful perspective.
Yeah.
Terri had alluded to it. Here we are in 2016 now, but previously in 2015, the University of Missouri football team, in protest of some racial incidents that perpetually had continued to happen on campus, took a stand and threatened to boycott their football game against Brigham Young University if the school president, Tim Wolf, had not resigned. Ultimately, the president ended up resigning, but it was a clear-cut example of student athletes using their voice to affect change, because had they not played that football game, Missouri would have forfeited some $1 million. So it became real. There was an economic impact involved. And I want to ask the group here, all four of you, what do you make of student athletes now? Not just professional athletes, but student athletes, Matt, using their voice to affect change on their campuses and maybe beyond.
I think it's great. Football is a huge revenue for any college. It's usually the main money maker. And I think, once you sit out and protest, you're making a stand. But then once, the school realizes, hey, we're going to lose money, we might need to listen to what these kids have to say and make some changes. And I think it's great. You saw not only the athletes, but then, a lot of other students rally behind them. And, they took a lot of heat for it, from some people said it wasn't right. And, I saw someone that wanted to, take their scholarships away and all kind of crazy things. But, ultimately, they stood in what they believed for and got a change, made a difference, and, got the person out that they wanted to. So I think it was great.
It's all about empowerment too. Being able to use your voice to empower others. And I know for a lot of us in this room, we're leaders, and we talk about our leadership skills and what it takes to be a leader. But how many times have you been faced with an issue where you have an opportunity to use your voice, be empowered, not only yourself, but empower those around you? And those college students were in a situation where they could have easily backed down and just played, because when you go to college, it's almost an expectation you must play, no matter what happens. And
That hammer that coaches and administrators, athletic directors use, your scholarship, that's $40,000, $50,000 a year that you're putting at risk. How much do you think about that when you're saying, hey, I'm not going to play?
You think about it a lot. Think about it a lot when you think about how much it costs to go to college now, and a lot of people in debt.
A lot of people wouldn't be there without a scholarship, so they put a lot on the line. So you
but
really
I
got to
think being able to use your voice, being able to empower others and all the kids that look up to us, and look up to them as college students. Like, you have opened the door to be able to be a leader, to show what being a leader is all about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I recently did a basketball game at the University of Missouri, ran into one of their administrators, and we got to talking at the airport as I was waiting for my flight, and she said that enrollment subsequently since that incident is down some 15 to 18%. So you can look at different reasons why, but her feeling was, and this is just one person's opinion, that incident had some kind of impact on the school moving forward and the action they took. Your thoughts, Jalen? Not that long ago, you were wearing the baggy shorts at Michigan and dealing with some of the inequities of being a student athlete.
I think it's important for everyone to acknowledge that there are different approaches to get the same result. When you walk through the National Museum here today, there's an MLK approach, and that was a nonviolent approach to turn the other cheek. And then there was a Malcolm X approach that I'm happy that is now being embraced here, because as a visitor here a few years ago, and I know it's been renovated, $27 million, but it was not openly embraced. And his way was a self-defense, as he called it. So I am a big proponent of using that power to get change immediately. So I remember being in college, and Big John Thompson, who was the coach of Georgetown, was walking off at the beginning of the games to propose because of Prop 48 and all of the things that he felt like were unjust about how that was being administered. And they reached out to us to be a part of that movement. And had that happen a couple of more games, we were going to walk off.
Wow.
So everybody has their different approach to how they want to get to an outcome, but I understand the power of $1 because I grew up without any. and how do you get leagues, NBA, NFL, NCAA, to acknowledge what you're saying and actually act on it? The only way they truly will do it if they see that you're willing to make that fiscal sacrifice. And that's what it becomes, where you see labor negotiations or anything like that. Like in baseball, that actually worked out for Curt Flood, because why? Baseball, unlimited contracts, no salary cap, no dress code. They have 50 players making over $100 million that they could be walking through here and you wouldn't even know who they are. Okay? But the other sports that just so happen to be black sports, putting it out there, owning it. NBA, the NFL, salary caps, a lot more stringent with free agency, the number of years you can sign a contract, and we actually pay attention to what they're wearing before the games. We're watching what they're saying in the interviews. We're acknowledging if a player is being a part of a social movement or not. Baseball players, for example, not picking on baseball players in any way, shape, or form, aren't asked to have that same responsibility because it's not deemed a majority black sport.
The NBA has always been very inclusive in social awareness, social activism. There was no pushback by the league when the Black Lives Matter, I Can't Breathe t-shirts were being worn by you guys, right? And I mean, with the Donald Sterling incident, I mean, it was something where you guys, Matt, as the current player, didn't seem to openly find any resistance out there.
Yeah, I mean, you saw it here and there, but for the most part, you know, people agreed. It was an unfortunate situation, but I feel like he wasn't the only one that feels that way. He's not the only one that has that thought process, which is unfortunate but true. You know, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, various owners throughout different sports think that way. He just happened to get, you know, he's dumb enough to say it out loud. Unfortunately, you know, to be honest with you, unfortunately. So, you know, I think we do. I mean, like we touched on earlier, if you're comfortable enough to, you know, use your voice in a positive manner, we have an amazing platform. Social media has changed the world, and now athletes more than ever, you know, are heard, and you know, our opinions matter. And like you said, if you want to speak on something you're passionate about, I'm all for it.
It wasn't that long ago you were in college, Tamika. Are there institutional barriers to players being more active on social issues? Do you think that those exist?
I think not only in college, but even professional to an extent. I mean, we get judged on every single tweet, everything we put out there get judged negatively or positively. And that's something that I know even for me, before I put something out, I'm thinking like, okay, who will this affect and how will it affect, you know, and if it's something that I'm passionate about, I'll just speak about it because I'm willing to take the hit if it's something that somebody else doesn't agree on, but. But it is what it is.
Yeah. Spencer, your thoughts on the.
Well, Tamika is not like you or I. She's moved away from MySpace.
That's an inside joke.
No, it's an inside joke. But anyway, and I think that the athletes, let me just back up for 1 second. You know, Kurt Flood did not win that case. They settled the case afterwards, 1 year after, and refused to give it to a black man at that time, and they gave it to Andy Musselschmidt.
Pitcher.
Yeah. So, and you know, for years, I just would like to see my ruling not be so adversarial, you know, and not like, say, Haywood versus the NBA. I know Roe versus Wade, Brown versus the Board of Education, but it would be fitting if the ruling was just the Spencer Haywood rule, such as the Larry Bird rule, so that young men will know exactly who I am and what I've done, what kind of stance you took, so that it would be a little bit more friendly, you know, because I mean, to walk to players and say to them and so on, how you doing, and they look at me like just this blank, like, I mean, did you do anything for me? What happened? And you know, when you talk about the numbers, you talk about the years that a player gets. I'll just use LeBron because he's the king. The king is $100 million richer because of Spencer Haywood. He's 4 years on his legs because of Spencer Haywood. And it goes all the way back to Julius Erving, Magic Johnson. It has been thousands of players, or billions of dollars being made by these players. But yet, who is this Spencer Haywood? So I would hope that one day Charlie would do something about it. Yeah, I know Charlie. Yeah, he's a lawyer, so you know.
Yeah. There's
it's excellent.
Yeah, there's a whole groundswell and a new generation of athletes coming up all the time, and sports are just one pathway to success. No matter the endeavor, success always requires a lot of commitment and dedication, and a lot of talent, a lot of hard work. Our young men spend countless arduous hours practicing, shooting, playing, weightlifting. But the bottom line is just 3 out of 10,000 basketball players make it to the NBA. Or even maybe even fewer to the WNBA. You're right. I want to ask, I'll start with you, Jalen. Are we sending the right message in terms of the amount of time that young men spend practicing, playing, and pinning their hopes on a basketball dream as opposed to, something else, academics, or, when you talk about, should we be preparing them to buy a team instead of play for one?
Well, the dynamic plays out, it's only 24 hours in a day. And if you're going to make it to the NBA, you're going to have to practice and continue to practice and basically practice as much as you can. And that will take the entire day. That's just how it works. You guys have seen Steph Curry dribbling video. You know how much time and energy he put into doing that? Yeah. When somebody takes a lot of shots, gets in the weight room, you have to separate yourself from that pack you just described. And the only way you're going to do it is to strive for that excellence. And what do we do about things we're passionate about? We spend our time and money on them. There are only 4,000 people that have ever played a game in the NBA. Only 4,000. And so I understand that you want the youngster to spend more time and energy on doing other things like being educated, but that's where you have to learn about time management. Right. That there is 24 hours in a day. So you're going to sleep 8, you can work on your game for 8, and then you can do whatever else for 8. That's just how it has to be. But also what we try to embark on the students at our school is you can be more than one thing. I think that's what gets lost. And I do get disappointed when I'm talking to young folks and I say, what do you want to be? It's either a rapper, actor, or an athlete. And that's great. And my next question is, what else do you want to be? And I think that should be the challenge and the message that we try to convey. Not at all to discourage them from those goals or dreams, because there's so many successful people, including myself, that came and had the same dream. But what else do you want to be? What else do you strive to be? And so the way to do that is educate yourself and have more than one passion.
Right. Matt, you got 2 handsome little twin boys. Is the message be in the NBA or own the Memphis Grizzlies?
It's with them, it's both. They do everything, you know what I mean? And just to see them growing from my eyes, but just to kind of allude back, I think it's really a catch-22 with the situation, because sports has saved a lot of kids' lives. Kept them off the streets, kept them out of gangs, kept them away from drugs, kept them away, just kept them on that straight path. For me, that's how it was. A lot of my friends got in trouble, drugs, overdose, killed, jail, whatever it may be. And I would they were my friends, but I knew my goal was to be an athlete. So education is very important, don't get me wrong, but it's, when you're young and rambunctious and jumping off the walls, sitting down and reading or sitting down and writing is just, we don't want to do that. You know what I mean? So like Jalen said, it's definitely time management. You put a lot of responsibility on the parents to teach the kids at a young age, hey, if you don't get this homework done, you can't go to practice, or if you're not getting these grades, you can't play in your game. So you have to manage and understand that, okay, I can still get A's and B's, and then I can be a star athlete as well.
But the one thing I like about it's almost the opposite of what I said before about comparing the Major League Baseball to the NBA and the NFL. The one thing that basketball and football actually do in our country, it puts you on a path for education. Because you have to graduate from high school. Now you can't come out after high school. Right. So you have to go to college. So therefore, are you going to take advantage of it? Or is college going to be a turnstile?
Right. Tamika, your thoughts?
Wow. I agree with both of them. And, just looking at my path, and my parents did a really good job in making sure that we played a lot of different sports. But throughout the sport, the one thing, when we came home from school, the first thing we did after eating course. We had a snack, and then we had to do our homework before whatever sport we were going to. And that was what kept me like, okay, it wasn't just basketball. And I think nowadays, even when you look at the education aspect, but you're only playing one sport.
Right. It's so competitive. I have 2 young daughters, and there's such an all-in mentality when it comes to basketball.
That's not good. That's not good.
Yeah. But it's just the nature of how competitive things are. If you're trying to get that scholarship, there are millions and thousands of other girls out there trying to get that basketball scholarship.
And that's just my opinion.
Right, right.
Just my
it's
opinion.
a delicate balance.
It is. But, I think because I played so many different sports, all of them tied into what I ultimately am doing now. Like soccer was my first sport, and then softball, and then I played basketball. And I did track, and I did gymnastics. I was terrible. I did a lot of different sports, But ultimately, when I came to playing basketball, kind of like Jalen, if I didn't get good grades, I couldn't play. And I couldn't pass to get to the next level. And if you didn't have a certain grade point average, you were sitting outside. You were sitting on the sideline anyway. And so I think we do have a path of education through sports. But along the same way, like I agree, like most kids, and not to compare by race, but most black kids are raised like get your education so you can get a good job. And most white kids are raised, get your education so you can own this business, you can own that business, you can have this, you can have that. So the mindset across the board is we have to, all of us, not everybody's gonna have their own company and be their own entrepreneur, but at the same sense, when you have that mindset, you're much more of an asset to any company that you go to, and that's what we need to have.
Interesting. Spencer, have you seen the message evolve? You have a little bit more sense of history than us up here. Has the message evolved more from...
You're older. Hey, Jay, I didn't think I was going to make it to be 60.
Has the message evolved more from playing to be more of a manager or be more of an owner? Have you seen that path at all?
Yeah, I've seen the path, but we need to reflect back on the college system and the university system, for an example. There is, I think, $12 billion being made each year off of the back of athletes, and so the athlete don't get paid for that. So, I mean, you're starting from a starting point that is, everyone else is so far ahead, like an Alabama that just won the championship. I mean, those dollars are in a nonprofit. So everybody in that town makes money but the athletes. So, somewhere along the line, I think you see Grant Hill just got involved with the Atlanta Hawks, and that's a great thing. And Michael Jordan is with the Bobcats. And
Hornets now.
Hornets, okay. And are you on part of the Pistons?
I'm working.
That's the new message, right?
Well, Tamika told me she was going to be the owner and the general manager of the Pacers, so.
Oh, I did.
Yeah. So it's happening. It's happening, yes. Beautiful.
Of all the relevant data points, perhaps one of the most indicative, we've alluded to it already, of progress is wealth accumulation. But the so-called wealth gap between blacks and whites has actually widened over the last couple of decades. Now, if your business is basketball, this is a little bit of a concerning statistic and point. You want to comment on that, Spencer? Pick that up from there?
It's Obama's fault. No, I'm just joking. It's a joke. Come on. I'm just trying to play like the politician said, No. It's widening, and we have to, because one of the things about the civil rights movement, what happened was that we were so apt to want to be integrated with others that we left all of our business, all of our everything behind, and we integrated, and we have not been able to come back and claim our own, like what we owned before. So now we're like scattered trying to get to it, and eventually we're going to have to come and believe in our own and believe in ourselves. And I look at the NBA players, for an example. There's billions of dollars that they control, but yet I think LeBron is doing it in Akron, but we don't build the hotels, we don't own a bank, we don't do these things when we can just control at least that amount of things. So I like to see that happen. And it's not racial, it's just self. You want to protect yourself, you want to have opportunities for your young kids to come through and be able to get loans and get people who want to be in a home. They can go to a mortgage company. You look at Sachs just gave $5 billion after cheating people out of $100 billion. So it's, you know, so we got to take charge of our own. And that's what Reverend King was talking about. You know, own your own, do your own thing, you know? And like everybody else, there's no other race that we don't turn the dollar over in our community but one time. All other race turn it 6, 7 times, you know? Right. So without that, we can't create no wealth, we can't do anything. Right. Because we're reaching other people.
It's interesting how, you know, historically you talk about it, reinvestment. We saw during the tour just a moment ago here at the National Civil Rights Museum that Birmingham, Alabama, back in the 60s was a very prominent, thriving economic epicenter of African-American activity and commerce. Right. Jalen, you've got your Jalen Rose Learning Center in Detroit. Is wealth a part of your message, and wealth accumulation, and however you want to say it to your young students there? Is that part of your message and doctrine there?
Sure, it's fiscal literacy. And I want to go back to a point that Spencer was making about reinvesting the money. What ends up happening is the dynamic always plays out like this. You grow up in the inner city, but what is the first thing you do when you get money? You move. That's the dynamic. Why are you moving? Because everything is, there aren't any good supermarkets, there aren't any good restaurants, there aren't any good business. So what ends up happening is that's not a rich problem, that's a wealthy problem. And there have been a lot of people that are rich that tried to help tackle that problem in their community and ended up getting sacked. So that dynamic is unique in our country. And also, we went from wanting to participate, and that took so long to finally get on equal footing that we arrived, but yet the level of play continued to expand while we were getting there. And so, yes, now we're talking about ownership and the dollars that are being accumulated, but we're able to play, but we're not able to be GMs. We're not able to be presidents. We're definitely not able to be owners. Right. And who's writing those multi-million-dollar checks? Not us.
Interesting.
That's how it's played out.
What are those wealth accumulation conversations like inside the NBA locker rooms, man?
I think it's really power in numbers. And things I try to explain to my teammates is, we're, obviously a fist is, stronger than a singular finger. And any group of 3 or 4 guys, you don't even have to have the biggest LeBron names, but we all have enough money to where if we have a group, a solid group of 5 or 6 guys, and we start going out and trying to buy real estate and trying to buy these banks and parking lots and things that people are talking about. But I think that what Jaden touched on earlier, we came up with nothing. So once we get our money, our first thing to do is we're going to move, and then we're going to take care of our family instead of thinking about our children and our children's children, like the long term. It's just something we weren't brought up in, so we don't really understand, how you said, how to roll it over 5 or 6 times and, make it really work for us.
But it's almost like when you go out to a club. You can have the money to get in, but you don't have your wristband to get in VIP.
It's a different level. It's a different level of being in.
Right? And so you can see a team get bought for whatever, $500 million, and say, hey, 500 NBA players should put up $1 million. They can have a team. Right. It doesn't work like that. Right. They won't let you in. Yeah. So who do they let in? The greatest of all time. Yeah. That's the message that's sent. You have to be the greatest player of all time to own a team.
Tamika, your thoughts on it? That's a tough one.
Well, I don't even know where to start, because it's a little bit different for us.
We're all good.
Remember me.
Well, I guess You know, part of what you're saying is there's a difference between being rich versus wealthy.
No question. Yeah. The great American philosopher Chris Rock said that, right?
Yep. Yeah, got the video too. Yeah. You know, since we gathered last year, we've seen national conversation around social justice really go mainstream. And maybe it's just a sign of the times right now. There is, at the very least, heightened awareness of race-based inequities embedded in law enforcement, but awareness, visibility have not been enough to change culture. How do we move now from conversation to action? How do we get it to that next plateau and phase where you actually see real change? Spencer, let me start with you.
Well, I think that we're going to see real changes by reversing some of the things that are taking place now with 29 governors who have turned back all of the things that Dr. Martin Luther King fought for, their voters' rights. This year in the election, for an example, you have to have a special ID to vote. And I remember coming up as a kid in Mississippi, we had to go through a literacy test. My family did in order to vote. And then when you say, well, you fill out the literacy test, and they would say, no, it's not. So it's the same thing. And you got like hate mongers going on right now in terms of like, first it was President Obama, who's not a legal person to be president. And the next thing, we want to kick out all Mexicans. And then the last thing is now all Arabs are endangered. So,
You want to make America great.
I want to make America great. And you want to take me back to Mississippi picking cotton, which is, you know, we have to be a little bit more conscious and really want to get out and roll up our sleeves and do better than what we're doing now. Because we don't have to be like this.
Right. Jalen, from conversation to action, how does that move down the road a little bit?
My action took place starting the Jalen Rose Leadership Academy. Walking through, again, here today, looking at Brown versus the Board of Education, that's exactly what we're dealing with right now.
Wow.
There has been progress, but it's so much further to go that I can't see the finish line. And these are battles that I fight every day because I have an inner city school that's underfunded. Right now in Detroit, for those that follow the news, there's something happening called sick outs. And that's public school teachers currently, this is happening right now, okay, that are boycotting the conditions of the schools. Rodents, asbestos, security, cold classrooms in schools. And so the teachers had decided that these learning conditions are so horrible, nobody's listening to us, how can we finally be heard? So they're silently protesting until their schools until government addresses the needs. And I'm fortunate that the 415 kids I have in my building, they don't have to deal with that. Because while as an inner city school, for example, we get $7,200 per student. Well, a suburban public school gets $13,500 per student.
Inequity.
Okay, and how do they justify it? They pay more in taxes. Right? So a public education shouldn't be defined by your zip code. It is. So for those that have the thank you. So what has happened? For those that have the wherewithal and or an opportunity like myself, my kids are fortunate enough that they can go to private school, okay? There are some families who have the wherewithal that can now move into a community that has a functioning school that's doing well. Those that still live in the inner city, if they can, they send their kids to private school in the inner city. Well, public school has now become the fourth option. And if you're getting the fourth option of anything that you're going after, it's been picked over. And that's what's happened to our education. How can I get a student that is getting $7,200 to compete against students that come from households that their parents have been paying $30,000 a year for them to go to school for 13 years? That's an investment. To try to get these kids to compete in the same classroom is basically unfair. I'm getting kids on average in 9th grade getting 10 or 11 on the ACT. So, and we've done a really good job of increasing that 2 points each year, but that's still 18.
Right.
That's still 19.
There's ways to go. Yeah.
So it's still a long ways to go. And lastly, we get 0 state funding for our facility. Not a dime. Not to lease, rent, purchase, upgrade, renovate, repair.
So you're doing it all by private donation?
Absolutely. That's the only way it's going to happen.
Keep up the good fight.
Thank you.
Keep up the good fight. From words to actions, what are your final thoughts on this as we wrap it up?
Well, mine, I have my own Catch the Stars Foundation in Indianapolis. We're in our 12th year, and we focus on boys and girls ages 7 to 16, providing opportunity through fitness, literacy, and mentoring. So that's my way of being able to do action. You know, I'm constantly out in our community, in the Indianapolis community, and we're looking to expand, but constantly out there just trying to make a difference. You know, I always talk about the things that I've gone through growing up and where I'm at today. And you know, I was blessed. My father played in the NBA, so I never really had to go through hard times per se. But I always talk about just what it takes to be great and what it takes to move to that next level. So I'm not on the level like Jalen yet. But
Still playing.
yeah. That's right. I'm still playing.
I've been retired 2 years. I gotta do something.
But constantly looking for a way to just make a difference. And you know, Jalen, we spoke earlier for the junior NBA, during the junior NBA tournament, and one thing that we stressed on is, you know, if you can change 1 or 2 kids that will go on and make a difference, you're not going to be able to change everybody. And we can be in this room, and there's going to be some people that love what we talk about. There are going to be some people that hate what we talk about. But if you can touch 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or however many kids you can touch at a time, like that's what it starts with. You just have to start somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Matt, final thought?
I just think that, you know, we've all been blessed to be able to, you know, play the game we love and do what we love and make a substantial amount of money from it. And I think it is our obligation to give back in whatever way you feel necessary. I lost my mom to cancer, so I have a cancer foundation now that I've teamed up with UCLA with, and we provide kids who've beat cancer that want to go to college scholarships. So it's just like you said, you can't help everyone, and unfortunately, you know, you wish you could, but it's just the, you know, the numbers are staggering of how many people actually need help. But it's like you said, it's being a good person, you know, leading by example and helping where you can help, and teaching your kids the right and wrong way. You know, racism is very prevalent. Like I said, it's not going anywhere, I don't feel like, but you just got to teach your kids, you know, what is right and what is wrong and how to be a good person. Like Tamika said, you know, treat people how you want to be treated.
That's great. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for being here today. And as I wrap it up, I want to thank all of you for coming. And I always think of the, Spencer.
I want to know, just like Oscar Brown Jr., some of these young folks in here probably know who he was. When do I get my goddamn 40 acres and my mule? I'm talking about the players. I'm talking about the players.
I got the T-shirt.
You got the players.
I got the T-shirt.
I'm talking about the young players in the NBA. When do I get my 40 acres and my mule?
That was a I'm going to leave you with, that's tough to beat, man. But I always think of what we have just done here today. It brings to mind my favorite Martin Luther King saying was, if you can't fly, run. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. Whatever you do, let's just keep moving forward. All right, thank you. Thank you for coming.
I like that.